The call came on a Tuesday. I was at work, stacking boxes of industrial-grade cleaning supplies on a pallet, when my phone buzzed in my back pocket. It was Aunt Ruth. I ignored it. She never called during my shift unless it was important, but I was on a deadline and the foreman had been watching me like a hawk all morning. I finished the pallet, clocked out for my 15-minute break, and called her back from the loading dock. "Chloe, I need you to sit down," she said. Her voice was different. Not warm, not steady. It was tight, like a wire about to snap. "I'm at work, Aunt Ruth."
"What's going on?" She paused.
I could hear her breathing, shallow and quick. "It's your parents. There's been an accident." The words didn't land at first. They floated somewhere above my head, disconnected from anything real. I leaned against the concrete wall of the warehouse and watched a seagull circle over the parking lot. "Are they okay?" "No," she said. "They're not." The seagull kept circling. I kept watching it. "What happened? A fire?" "The house. It started in the middle of the night. Your father, he tried to get your mother out, but the smoke was too thick. They didn't make it." I waited for the tears to come. I waited for my knees to buckle, for my chest to cave in. But nothing happened. I just stood there, still watching the seagull, still holding the phone to my ear. "Chloe, are you there?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm here. Matthew's been calling. He's at the hospital. They've been asking for you." I closed my eyes. "What do they want? To see you?" "I don't know, Chloe. To make arrangements. You're next of kin." That was the part that almost made me laugh. Next of kin. After all those years of being invisible, suddenly I was the next of kin. I was the one they needed. "I'll be there," I said. "Give me an hour." The drive to the hospital was a blur. I don't remember the turns or the traffic lights or the parking garage. I remember walking through the automatic doors and seeing Matthew in the waiting room. He was sitting alone, his head in his hands. He looked smaller than I remembered. Deflated. When he looked up and saw me, his eyes were red and puffy. He stood up quickly, like a soldier snapping to attention. "Chloe," he said. His voice cracked. "I'm so glad you're here." I didn't hug him. I couldn't. I stood a few feet away and looked at him. "What happened?" He shook his head. "The fire department said it started in the kitchen. An electrical fire. They think it spread through the walls before anyone even woke up." "Dad." He stopped, pressing a hand to his mouth. Dad got Mom out of the bedroom, but the hallway was already full of smoke. He carried her down the stairs, but she was already unconscious. He went back in for the dogs. That's when the ceiling collapsed. There was a part of me that felt nothing, a cold, hollow part. And then there was another part, smaller but louder, that whispered. Of course, he went back for the dogs. They were more important, the dogs, both of them. They got out. Dad didn't. I looked down at my hands. They were pale and still. And Mom, brain activity's gone. They're keeping her on life support until we make a decision. The doctor said. He stopped again, swallowing hard. The doctor said there's no coming back from this. It's just a matter of time. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Aunt Ruth had appeared, her face drawn and pale. She pulled me into a hug, and for a moment, I let myself lean into her. The warmth of her body was real, solid. Everything else felt like a dream. "I'm so sorry, honey," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." I pulled away. "Where is she, my mom?" "Room 312. They're keeping her comfortable." I walked down the hallway, without waiting for them to follow. The hospital smell was overwhelming, antiseptic and stale coffee and something else, something metallic and wrong. When I reached the door to her room, I hesitated. Through the small window, I could see her lying in the bed, hooked up to machines that breathed for her, beeped for her, kept her alive. She looked smaller than I remembered, too. Fragile. The way she used to look at night, when she thought everyone was asleep and she'd sit in the dark living room, staring at nothing. I pushed open the door and walked in. I sat down in the chair beside her bed. Her hand was cold when I took it. I don't know how long I sat there. The machines beeped in a steady rhythm, indifferent to my presence. I thought about all the times she'd looked through me, all the times she dismissed me or blamed me or made me feel like a stranger in my own home. I thought about the dented fender and the truck and the laundry she folded for Matthew. I thought about the letter. I don't know what to say to you, I said out loud. The machines didn't answer. They just kept beeping. I spent so long being angry at you. And now I don't get to be angry anymore. I don't get to fix anything.
I don't get to make you see.
I just get to sit here and watch you leave. Her chest rose and fell with the ventilator. Mechanical.
Hollow.
I waited for something to break inside me, for the dam to crack. But I was dry. Empty. Hey. I looked up. Matthew stood in the doorway, his hands jammed in his pockets. The doctors want to talk to us. About next steps. I nodded and stood up, letting my mother's hand slip out of mine. Okay. We walked to a small conference room where a doctor was waiting with a folder in front of her. She was young, maybe 30, with tired eyes and a calm voice. She explained the situation in clinical terms. No brain function, no hope of recovery. The kindest thing we could do would be to let her go. I looked at Matthew. He was crying again, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. She's your daughter, he said to me, his voice cracking. I can't make this choice alone. I thought about my mother, about the way she'd always looked to Matthew for everything. She'd never asked me for anything. She'd never needed me. And now, for the first time in my life, she needed me to make the hardest decision of all. Do it, I said. Let her go. Matthew stared at me. Chloe, she's not here anymore, I said. She left a long time ago. We're just keeping a body alive. The doctor nodded slowly. I'll have the nurses prepare everything. When we left the hospital, the sun was setting. I walked to my car and sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the dashboard. My hands were trembling now. The tears came late, but they came. They came so hard I couldn't breathe. I thought about the house I'd left behind, the house where everything had started and ended, the house that had burned. And then I thought about what came next. The funeral, the arrangements, the mess of it all. And there, in the middle of my grief, a small, cold thought took root. What about the house, the property, the land, my grandmother's money? I didn't want to think about it. But the thought was already there, sharp and stubborn. I drove to Aunt Ruth's house and fell asleep on the couch. I didn't want to be alone in my room. I didn't want to close my eyes and see the fire, the smoke, the cold hospital room. I wanted to feel nothing. And for a few hours I did. The funeral was 3 days later. The church was full of people I didn't know, old friends of my parents, co-workers from my father's firm, neighbors who'd watched me grow up from behind their curtains. I stood at the front, next to Matthew, and accepted handshakes and hugs and murmured condolences. I wore a black dress I'd bought at a thrift store, the only one I could afford. Matthew wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. After the service, we stood by the graves and watched the caskets lower into the ground. 2 caskets, side by side, together in death the way they'd never been in life. Aunt Ruth was beside me, her arm linked through mine. She squeezed my elbow when the priest said the final prayer. After everyone else had gone, I stood alone by the grave. The ground was muddy from the rain the night before. My heels sank into the dirt and I didn't care. They left everything to Matthew, I said out loud. The words felt like a confession. They always did. Aunt Ruth came up behind me. Chloe, there's something we need to talk about. I turned to look at her. There was an expression on her face I'd never seen before. Not pity, not sympathy, something else. Something careful. What is it? Your grandmother's will, she said. The one you found in your parents' office. I need to tell you something about it. Something they never knew. I felt my stomach drop. What? She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope, yellowed and worn. She had a separate trust. She told me about it before she died. She said I should give it to you when the time was right. And I think the time is right. The envelope was heavy in my hands. I couldn't open it. I couldn't breathe. What is this? Your grandmother was a very smart woman, Chloe, and she saw a lot more than your parents gave her credit for. She set aside a trust fund for you. Not much, but enough to make a start. She didn't tell anyone, not your parents, not anyone. She said she was afraid your mother would try to take it for Matthew. And she didn't want that. The air felt thin. The sky was too wide. Why didn't you tell me? Because you weren't ready, she said. And because I didn't want to make things worse. But now, I don't think you need anyone's permission anymore. I think you know exactly what you want to do with your life. That night, I sat in Aunt Ruth's spare room and opened the envelope. Inside was a deed. A small piece of property. Not much, a single-story house in a rundown neighborhood that my grandmother had bought decades ago. And there was a letter, written in her careful cursive, to my beloved Chloe. This was always yours. Use it well. Be free. I didn't sleep that night. I held the deed in my hands and imagined what it could mean. A place to live. A place to start again. A place that wasn't filled with blame and guilt and the ghost of my parents' expectations. And then I remembered Matthew. I remembered how he'd stood at the funeral, crying into his handkerchief, accepting everyone's comfort. I remembered the will his parents had left behind, the house he'd been promised, the money he'd always had and never earned. I wondered if he knew how much I'd hated him. I wondered if he'd ever cared, and then I decided it didn't matter. The next day, I went to the lawyer's office. I sat in a leather chair and signed papers and listened to numbers I didn't fully understand. My grandmother's trust fund, small as it was mine. And the house she'd bought, the one in the bad part of town, was mine, too. Are you sure about this? The lawyer asked. The property is in need of significant repairs. You could sell it for the land value, but I'm sure. I said it. I drove to the property later that day. It was worse than I'd expected. The roof was half collapsed, the front porch was rotted through, and the yard was overgrown with weeds taller than me. But the bones were solid. The foundation was still good. And the neighborhood was quiet, not the dangerous kind of quiet, just the normal kind. And I sat on the front steps and looked at the house. My house. My grandmother's house. And I smiled. It was the first time I'd really smiled in years. That night, Matthew called. He was drunk. I could tell from the slur in his voice.
Chloe, he said.
We need to talk. About the estate. The family home. I think we should split it. 50-50. I laughed. I couldn't help it. That's not what the will says, Matthew. I know, but nothing, I said. They left you everything. They made sure of it. And I walked away. You got exactly what you wanted. I didn't want any of this, he said, his voice cracking. I didn't want them to die. Neither did I said. But that doesn't change anything. He was silent for a long time. Then, quietly, what do you want from me? Nothing, I said. I don't want anything from you. That's the point. I hung up and lay on the floor of my new house, looking up at the sagging ceiling. It was going to take months to fix, maybe years. But it was mine. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The first month in the house was a battle. I woke up every morning before dawn, pulled on my work boots, and tackled the mess my grandmother had left behind. The roof was the first thing I fixed. I'd saved enough from my warehouse job to buy tarps and shingles, and I spent 2 weekends climbing up and down a borrowed ladder, hammering nails until my hands blistered and bled. The neighbors watched me from their porches. They didn't say much, just nodded when I waved. An old man named Mr. Henderson across the street brought me lemonade on the 3rd day. Your grandmother was a good woman, he said. She'd be proud of what you're doing. I didn't tell him. I barely knew her. She'd been a distant figure in my childhood, the kind of relative who sent birthday cards with $5 bills and smelled like lavender. I remembered her hands, bony and spotted, reaching out to touch my cheek when I was 9. You're strong, she'd said. Stronger than you know. I hadn't understood what she meant back then. I was just a kid who couldn't stop crying over scraped knees and mean kids at school. But I understood now that the kitchen was a disaster. The cabinets were water-damaged, the linoleum floor was peeling up in jagged strips, and the stove hadn't worked in years. I ripped everything out myself. A sledgehammer became my closest companion. I swung it at drywall and particle board and decades of neglect, and every swing felt like I was hitting something else. Something older. My mother's voice, telling me I was careless. Matthew's smirk. My father's silence. One night, after a particularly long day, I collapsed on the floor of the empty living room. The windows were boarded up, but moonlight leaked through the cracks. I lay on my back and stared at the exposed ceiling joists and thought about the funeral. I thought about the two caskets, side by side in the damp earth. I thought about the lawyer's office and the cold leather chair and the weight of signing papers that made me an orphan on paper but had made me one long before I started to cry. Not the quiet tears I'd shed in the hospital. These were ugly, heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep, somewhere I'd locked away years ago. I cried for the little girl who'd tried so hard to be good. I cried for the teenager who'd watched her brother get a car for his 16th birthday while she got a second-hand bike. I cried for the woman I'd become, who'd survived by building walls so thick she'd forgotten how to let anyone in. And then I stopped. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and sat up. The house was silent except for the hum of the old refrigerator I'd managed to get running. I looked around the gutted room and felt something shift inside me. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't even peace. It was resolution. A quiet, stubborn refusal to let the past win. The next morning, I went back to work. Aunt Ruth called every few days. She didn't push, didn't ask too many questions. She just checked in, let me know she was there. How's the house? She'd ask, coming along. I'd say, have you eaten today? Protein bar. That's not a meal, Chloe. I'll heat up some soup later. She'd sigh, but she wouldn't lecture. She knew better than anyone that I didn't need a mother. I needed a witness. Someone to see what I was building without trying to build it for me. Matthew called once. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, his voice strained and apologetic. Chloe, I know you don't want to talk to me. I get it, but there are some things we need to sort out. Paperwork, the estate. It's not just the house, there's a lot of other stuff. Can you call me back? Please. I deleted the voicemail and went back to sanding the kitchen countertops. The wedding invitation came 2 weeks later. It was thick and cream-colored, embossed with gold lettering. The kind of invitation that cost more than I'd spent on groceries in the past 6 months. I stared at it for a long time, turning it over in my hands. Matthew and someone named Amanda. The wedding was set for 6 months from now. A vineyard in Napa. The reception was at some exclusive country club. The whole thing screamed money. Other people's money, of course. Matthew had never earned anything in his life. I thought about what he'd said on the phone. There are some things we need to sort out. This was what he meant. He needed his sister to show up and play happy family so he could project the image he'd always been desperate to project. The successful businessman. The devoted son. The family man. I tore the invitation in half and threw it in the trash, but it didn't disappear. The image of it lingered in my mind. The gold embossing. The creamy paper. The smug, unspoken assumption that I'd fall in line, that I'd show up and smile and pretend none of it had ever happened. Aunt Ruth called that evening. Did you get the invitation? Yeah. And I threw it away. There was a pause on her end. I heard her exhale. I figured you might. He doesn't get it, Aunt Ruth. He doesn't see what he did. What they all did. I know, honey, but you can't let him take up space in your head. He's not worth it. He's getting married, I said. He's going to have this huge, perfect wedding, and he's going to stand up there with his beautiful wife and pretend he's this amazing person. And no one's going to know. No one's going to know what he did to me. Did you ever think, Aunt Ruth said carefully, that maybe you don't need anyone to know, that maybe the only person who needs to know is you? I didn't answer. I couldn't, because she was right, and that was the worst part. I'd spent so long wanting Matthew to pay for what he'd done, wanting my parents to see, wanting someone to validate the pain I'd carried for so long. But they were gone. And Matthew wasn't going to wake up one day and become a different person. He was always going to be the golden child, the beloved son, the one who could do no wrong. No amount of truth-telling was going to change that. But I didn't have to carry it anymore. I didn't have to be the ghost in the basement, the daughter nobody wanted, the sister who was always wrong. I could let it go. I could drop the weight and walk away. That night, I sat at my grandmother's old kitchen table, the one I'd salvaged from the junk pile and refinished with my own hands, and I wrote Matthew a letter. I told him I'd come to the wedding. I told him I wanted to see the family again. That I lied. But it was the kind of lie that served a purpose. 3 weeks later, I walked into my brother's wedding. The vineyard was sprawling, all manicured vines and golden sunlight. I'd bought a dress off the clearance rack at a department store, navy blue and simple. I wore my grandmother's pearl earrings, the only inheritance she'd ever given me directly. Matthew was at the altar, handsome and nervous, his bride-to-be glowing beside him that I watched from the back of the crowd. I saw relatives I hadn't seen in years, some of them recognizable only by the shape of their noses or the tilt of their heads. I saw my mother's sister-in-law, a woman who'd always looked at me like I was something that had crawled out from under a rock. I saw my father's brother, the one who'd given Matthew a trust fund for his 18th birthday and given me a handshake. And I felt nothing. No anger. No bitterness. No ache that I stayed for the ceremony. I stayed for the reception. I smiled and shook hands and ate dry chicken and rubbery vegetables. And then, when the speeches started and Matthew's best man was recounting stories of their college days, I slipped out. Aunt Ruth was waiting in the parking lot. She'd come as my plus one, but she'd left early. "I don't do crowds," she'd said. I got in the car and closed the door. "How is it?" she asked. "Fine." "Did you talk to him?" "Not really. A lot of people didn't get the chance." She nodded. We drove in silence for a while. The sun was setting over the hills, turning the sky the color of copper. "Chloe," she said, her voice gentle. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah." "Why did you really come?" I stared out the window. The world was blurring past, fields and fences, and distant buildings. "I don't know," I said. I thought I wanted closure, but I don't think that's what this was. Then what was it? I thought about it. Really thought about it. "I wanted to see if I could do it," I said. I wanted to see if I could stand in the same room as him, with all those people, and not fall apart. I wanted to see if I was done. "And are you done?" I looked down at my hands. They were calloused and dry from months of work, still stained with sawdust. They looked like the hands of someone who'd built something real. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." Aunt Ruth reached over and squeezed my shoulder. "Good." The house was waiting for me when we got back. It wasn't much to look at, still needed work, still had the sagging porch and the patchy roof, and the yard full of dead weeds. But the lights were on inside. I'd installed them myself, wired them from scratch. They were warm and yellow, and they made the place look almost like a home. I walked up to the front door and unlocked it. The living room was a mess of tools and drop cloths and half-finished projects. But I could see the bones of what it would become. The hardwood floors I'd found under the carpet. The windows I'd replaced, the ones that let in the morning light. The fireplace I'd cleaned out and rebuilt. That I sat on the floor and looked around at the walls. I could hear the pipes groaning in the walls. But I was used to them now. They were part of the music of the house. It felt right. It felt mine. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello, is this Chloe Williams?" "Yes." "This is the county clerk's office. I'm calling about a property tax notice for a parcel on Maple Street. It appears there's a balance of $4,200 due by the end of the month." My blood ran cold. I don't have that kind of money. "I understand. But if the balance isn't paid, the property will be subject to foreclosure proceedings. You might want to contact a lawyer or a financial advisor to discuss your options." I hung up. The house seemed to close in around me, the walls suddenly smaller.
Edie começou a falar.
I'd done so much, and now it was all slipping away. That I called Aunt Ruth. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "I'll be right there." She arrived 20 minutes later with a checkbook in her hand. "How much?" $4,200. She wrote the check without hesitation. "Considered a loan. You can pay me back when you're on your feet." "Aunt Ruth, I can't." "You can and you will," she said.
"But not right now."
"Right now, you need to focus on finishing your house." I looked at her. The woman who'd taken me in when no one else would. The woman who'd kept my grandmother's secret for years, waiting for the right moment. The woman who'd shown up at a hospital waiting room without question and held me while I fell apart. "Why are you doing this?" I asked as she looked at me, then really looked. And in her eyes, I saw something I'd never seen before. Not pity, not obligation. Something else. Something I'd waited my whole life to see.
Because you're family, she said.
The only family that matters. I hugged her. I held her tight, and I cried into her shoulder. But this time, the tears felt different. They felt like hope. I paid Aunt Ruth back in 6 months. It wasn't easy. I picked up extra shifts at the warehouse, worked double shifts whenever they were offered, and spent every spare hour scraping paint, hammering nails, and replacing drywall. The house slowly came together. The kitchen got new cabinets, cheap ones from a salvage yard, but they worked. The bathroom got a new toilet and a shower that didn't leak. The roof held through the winter rains, and by spring, the place was livable. Mr. Henderson brought me a pie.
For the housewarming, he said.
My wife used to make these. She's been gone 5 years now, but I still keep the recipe. I invited him in. He sat on my rebuilt porch and ate a slice of pie and talked about his wife and his garden and the neighborhood as it used to be. He talked about my grandmother, too. She was a spitfire, he said. She lived in that house for 40 years, you know. After her husband died, she fixed it up herself. Did the plumbing, the wiring, everything. She didn't need anyone. I wondered why she'd never told me that. I wondered why she'd never shown me that side of herself. But maybe she had in her own way. Maybe she'd left me the house for a reason. The call came on a Thursday. I was at the warehouse, stacking pallets of cleaning supplies again, when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number. I let it go to voicemail. At lunch, I checked the message. It was Matthew. Chloe, it's me. I need to talk to you. It's about Mom and Dad. Something you should know. Please call me back. I almost deleted it, but something stopped me. I thought about the funeral, the graves, the cold hospital room. I thought about my mother's face under the oxygen mask. I thought about my father's body, somewhere in a morgue, waiting for the ground to swallow him. I called back. Matthew picked up on the first ring.
Chloe.
Thank you. I wasn't sure you'd call. What do you want? He was quiet for a moment. Then, I found something. In Dad's study. A safe behind the wall. I didn't know it was there until I started cleaning the place out.
There are documents in there.
Wills.
Deeds.
I don't know, some stuff that doesn't make sense. Like what? I think Mom and Dad had another trust fund, he said.
For you.
I found a letter from Grandma. It says she set up a separate trust for you, but it's different from the one you already have. It's bigger. A lot bigger. And I think Mom and Dad kept it from you. I felt the world tilt. My knees went weak. What are you talking about? I don't understand all of it. The language is complicated. But the lawyer's name is on the paperwork. Some firm downtown. I can send you the details. I don't want you to think I'm trying to take it. It's yours. It was always yours. I stood in the middle of the warehouse, surrounded by boxes and machinery and the hum of fluorescent lights. I felt like I was dreaming. Why are you telling me this? Because it's the right thing to do, he said. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Chloe. Since the fire. Since Mom and Dad died. I've been thinking about how things used to be.
How I used to act.
And I'm not proud of it. He sounded different. Sincere. But I'd been fooled by him before. I'd been fooled by his tears, his apologies, his promises. Matthew, if this is some kind of trick, it's not a trick.
I swear.
I'm not asking for anything. I just thought you should know. You deserved to know a long time ago. I hung up without saying goodbye. I couldn't speak. My throat was closed up and my hands were shaking. I walked to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was a stranger. A stranger who'd just been told everything she thought she knew was wrong. I went back to work. I finished my shift. I drove home and sat in the driveway for an hour, staring at my house. My grandmother's house. My house. And then I made a decision. I called a lawyer. The office was downtown, in a building that smelled like old paper and old money. I sat in a leather chair across from a man named Mr. Crawford. He was thin and gray-haired, with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice like sandpaper. Ms. Williams, he said, I'm glad you called. I've been waiting for you. I blinked. Waiting for me? Your grandmother made me promise to hold on to these documents until you were ready, he said. I tried to contact you a few years ago, but your parents intercepted the letters. They told me you weren't interested. that you had no desire to claim your inheritance. I felt the blood drain from my face. They knew about this, they knew everything, he said. Your grandmother set up a trust for you when you were born. It was substantial. She wanted to make sure you'd always be taken care of, no matter what happened. But your parents, he paused, tapping his fingers on the desk. Your parents found a way to get around it. They convinced her to change the terms, to tie the money to certain conditions. What kind of conditions? I have the full document here, he said, pulling out a thick manila folder. Essentially, the funds were to be released to you only upon your marriage or upon your parents' death. It was a compromise your grandmother made to keep the peace. She didn't want to cause a rift in the family. I stared at the folder. So all this time they were waiting for me to get married. It seems that way, yes. The bulk of the trust is still intact. Your parents never touched it. They couldn't. It was legally bound in a way that prevented them from accessing it themselves. I could barely breathe. How much, mister? Crawford slid a sheet of paper across the desk. I looked at it. The number was impossible. It was more money than I'd ever seen, more than I'd ever imagined. It was freedom. It was security. It was everything I'd ever wanted. Why, I asked. Why didn't they tell me? Why did they make me suffer like that, mister? Crawford leaned back in his chair. I can't answer that, Ms. Williams. I wish I could. But I've been in this business long enough to know that families are complicated. Parents do strange things. Sometimes they don't see what's right in front of them. Sometimes they're too afraid to let go. I took the paperwork home and read it cover to cover. I read about my grandmother's intentions, her careful planning, the ways she'd tried to protect me from a future she knew might be difficult. She'd known my parents. She'd known their weaknesses. She'd known they'd never give me what I needed. And she'd given it to me anyway. I sat on the floor of my living room and held the documents against my chest. I could feel the house around me, the walls I'd rebuilt, the floors I'd sanded, the windows I'd scraped. I'd made this place mine. And now I had the means to make it beautiful, but I also had a question that wouldn't go away. Why had Matthew told me? Why had he given up the secret the next week? Matthew called again. He sounded nervous. Chloe, I know you don't trust me. I don't blame you. But I want to come see the house. I want to see what you've done. I hesitated. The thought of him in my space made my skin crawl. But there was something in his voice, something fragile, that made me say yes. He came on a Sunday morning. I'd cleaned the place up a little, swept the floors, straightened the furniture. He arrived in a silver sedan that was way too nice for the street. He looked out of place in his pressed shirt and shiny shoes. Wow, he said as he walked through the front door. This is amazing, Chloe. You did all this, yeah. It's beautiful. I mean it. I've never seen you build anything before. I didn't know what to say to that. I showed him the kitchen, the living room, the small bedroom I'd turned into an office. He asked questions, genuine ones, about the wiring and the plumbing. He didn't patronize me. He didn't smirk as we sat on the porch with coffee. The neighborhood was quiet. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Mr. Henderson waved from his yard. Chloe, I need to tell you something, Matthew said. He looked down at his cup. I know I was terrible to you. I know I took everything for granted. I let Mom and Dad treat you like you were invisible, and I never said anything. I never defended you. I waited. There was more. There was always more. When I found Grandma's trust documents in Dad's safe, he said, I didn't just find the trust. I found a letter from Mom. She wrote it a few years ago, before she got sick.
She talked about you.
She said she was afraid she'd made a mistake. She said she didn't know how to fix things. She was scared, Chloe. She was scared of losing you. I shook my head. That doesn't make sense. She ignored me my whole life. I know, he said. But I don't think she was ignoring you. I think she was protecting herself. She didn't know how to deal with you. You were different. You wanted things. You asked questions. You didn't just go along with everything like I did. And I think it scared her. I set my coffee down. Matthew, I don't want to hear excuses for her.
She's dead.
It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me, he said. I've been carrying this guilt for years. I should have stood up for you. I should have told Mom to stop. I should have told Dad to give you the money from Grandma's will. But I was a coward. I didn't want to lose my position. I didn't want to be the one who messed things up. He looked up at me. His eyes were red. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Chloe. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I see it now. I see what they did. I see what I did. And I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to be the kind of person you deserved all along. I stared at him. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. He was still Matthew, still the golden boy, still the one who'd gotten everything handed to him. But there was something different now. Something wounded. Something real. What about Amanda? I asked. What about her? You got married. You have a wife. A life. You don't need me. He shook his head. Amanda and I are separated. She found out about everything, the trust, the estate, the way I treated you. She couldn't handle it. She said I was a different person than the one she married. And she was right. I didn't know what to say to that. I felt a strange pull in my chest. Not affection. Not forgiveness. Just something, I don't know if I can trust you, I said. After everything, I know, he said. I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking you to let me try. That's all. I looked out at the street. The sun was climbing, warming the porch. Mr. Henderson was watering his roses. A car drove past slowly, music playing from open windows. Okay, I said. I'll let you try. I didn't say it would be easy. I didn't say I'd forget. But I said it. And for the first time, Matthew smiled without smirking. Matthew started showing up every Saturday. He'd bring coffee and bagels from a shop downtown, and he'd sit on my porch and watch me work. At first, I didn't know what to do with him. He was a ghost from a past I'd buried, a reminder of everything I'd escaped. But he kept coming, and I kept letting him. The first time he picked up a paintbrush, I almost laughed. He'd never done manual labor in his life. His hands were soft, his nails manicured, his clothes expensive. But he rolled up his sleeves and started painting the trim around the windows, and he didn't complain when he got paint on his shirt. He didn't complain about the heat or the dust or the blisters forming on his palms. He just worked. Your technique is terrible, I said, watching him smear paint over a window frame. I know, he said. But I'm learning. Where'd you learn to be so humble? He paused, brush in hand. Amanda.
She taught me a lot.
One of them was how to admit when I was wrong. She was really good at that. Where is she now? Back in the city. We're not talking much. She wants space. I don't blame her. I went back to my work, sanding down the front door. The wood was old and splintered, but underneath the grime, it was beautiful. Oak, probably. Solid. I imagined it stripped and stained, the grain shining in the light. Chloe, Matthew said. I want to ask you something. Go ahead. Do you hate me? I stopped sanding. The question hung in the air between us. A bird chirped in the tree by the porch. The sound of a lawnmower hummed from somewhere down the street. I don't know, I said. I used to. For a long time. I hated you more than anyone. You were everything I wasn't. You had everything I wanted. You didn't deserve any of it, and you never even noticed. I noticed, he said quietly. I just didn't care. I told myself you were jealous. That you were bitter because you didn't have what I had. I made it your fault. That was easier than admitting the truth. Which was that I was scared, he said. I was scared of losing Mom and Dad's approval. I was scared of being the failure. So I let you be the one they blamed. I stood by and watched them tear you down, and I didn't say a word. I made you into the scapegoat, so I didn't have to be one. I picked up the sander again. Why are you telling me this now? Because I want you to understand, he said. I'm not trying to make excuses. There are no excuses for what I did. But I want you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. And I'm ashamed of it. Every day.
I didn't say anything.
I turned the sander on and let the noise fill the space between us. The vibration hummed through my arms, through my chest. I focused on the wood, on the dust rising in clouds, on the smooth surface emerging beneath the grit. When the door was done, I turned off the sander and looked at it. It was beautiful. The grain was warm and rich, the color of honey in the afternoon light. Can I ask you something? Matthew said. You just did. Can I ask you another one? I sighed.
Phoenix.
Why didn't you take the money and run when you found out about the trust? You could have sold the house and moved anywhere. You could have started over. Why stay? I wiped the dust off my face with the back of my hand. Because this is mine, I said. I built this. I fixed this. Every board, every nail, every coat of paint. This is the first thing in my life that I've done entirely on my own. And I'm not going to walk away from it. Matthew nodded slowly. I get that. I don't think you do, Matthew. You've never had to build anything. Everything was handed to you. Your car, your education, your job. You've never had to fight for anything in your life. Maybe not, he said. But I'm fighting now. For the first time, I'm fighting for something that actually matters. I'm fighting to be a better person. And I don't know how to do that. I've never done it before. I looked at him. He was a stranger. He was my brother. I didn't know how to reconcile the two. The next Saturday, I got a call from Mr. Crawford. His voice was tight, strained. Ms. Williams, I have some news. It's about the trust. What about it? Your mother's will is being contested by a cousin of hers. Someone named Eleanor. I didn't know any Eleanor. What does she want? She's claiming that the trust was set up under false pretenses. That your grandmother was coerced into creating it. She's filing a motion to have it dissolved and the assets redistributed among the family. I felt the walls close in. Can she do that? She can try. It's a long shot. The trust is airtight. But it's going to require legal fees, court appearances, time. A lot of time. Where am I supposed to get money for a lawyer? I'm barely keeping the lights on. Mr. Crawford paused. Your brother might be able to help. He's been in contact with me as well. He's offered to cover the initial costs. I was stunned. Matthew, he seemed sincere. But I wanted to run it by you before I accepted anything. I hung up and sat on the porch for a long time. The sun was climbing, warm on my face. I thought about Matthew, about his hands on the paintbrush, about his eyes when he'd told me he was ashamed. I thought about all the years he'd spent taking and all the weeks he'd spent giving. I didn't know if I could trust him. But I didn't know if I could do this alone. When Matthew arrived with his usual bag of bagels, I was waiting for him on the porch. We need to talk. I said it. I told him everything. About Eleanor, the contest, the legal fees. About Mr. Crawford's suggestion. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. I can cover it, he said when I finished. That's not a problem. Why are you doing this, Matthew? Really? Because it's the right thing to do, he said. Because you're my sister. Because I owe you. And because I want to be part of this. I want to help you keep what's yours. I stared at him. He stared back. There was no smirk, no smugness. Just earnestness. Just a man trying to make things right. Okay, I said. Okay. We worked together that afternoon. We painted the living room walls a warm, soft gray. We talked about small things. The weather, the neighbors, the stray cat that had taken up residence under the porch. We didn't talk about the lawsuit. We didn't talk about the past. We just worked. When the sun started to set, we sat on the floor and looked at our work. The room was transformed. It was bright and clean and alive. Chloe, Matthew said. I've been thinking about something. Another deep thought, something like that. He smiled. What if you sold this place after everything settled? Use the money to buy a better property. Something bigger. You could start a business. A renovation business. You're good at this. You could teach other people. I laughed. Me teach people? Listen, I've seen you work. You're better than half the contractors I've hired over the years. You've got an eye for it. And you've got the experience. You fixed this place from scratch. That's not nothing. I lean my head against the wall. I don't know if I want to sell it. This is my home now. You don't have to decide now, he said. But think about it. You could take everything you've learned here and build something bigger. Something amazing. You could be great, Chloe. You've always had that in you. You just never had a chance to show it. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The words were stuck in my throat. He sounded so sincere. He sounded like he believed it. That night, I lay in bed and looked at the ceiling. I thought about the house, about the months of sweat and dust and tears. I thought about my grandmother's trust, the money that was slipping through my fingers. I thought about Matthew's offer, and I thought about what I wanted. For the first time in my life, I knew the answer, that I wanted to be free. I wanted to build something of my own. I wanted to look back at the person I used to be and know that I'd made it out. I fell asleep with a plan forming in my head. A plan for the house. A plan for the business. A plan for my life. That the next morning I woke up early and called Mr. Crawford. "I'm going to fight," I said. "I'm going to keep everything. And I'm going to make it work." "I thought you might say that," he said. "I'll send the paperwork." When Matthew showed up that Saturday, I met him at the door with a blueprint. It was a rough drawing, done on scrap paper, but it showed everything. A business. A renovation company. My name on the logo. "Would you be my first investor?" I asked. He looked at the blueprint, then at me. His eyes were wet. "Yeah," he said. "I would. I'd really love to." I didn't hug him. Not then. But I smiled. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a lie. The lawsuit dragged on for 8 months. Eleanor was relentless. She hired a team of lawyers who filed motion after motion, each one designed to bleed me dry. I spent my days at the warehouse and my nights at the kitchen table, surrounded by legal documents I barely understood. Mr. Crawford was patient, explaining every clause and precedent, but the stress was eating me alive. I lost weight. I stopped sleeping. My hands shook when I held a coffee cup. Matthew covered the legal fees without complaint. He never asked for repayment. He never brought it up. He just showed up every Saturday with his coffee and his bagels and his willingness to paint and sand and scrape. He was a rock. A steady, reliable presence I'd never expected. But the weight of the lawsuit was heavier than anything I'd carried before. It wasn't just the money. It was the principle. Eleanor was a stranger, a woman I'd never met, and she was trying to take the last thing my grandmother had ever given me. The audacity of it made my blood boil. Some days, I sat in my car in the warehouse parking lot and screamed until my voice gave out. Other days, I cried so hard I couldn't drive home. Aunt Ruth came over more often. She'd bring casseroles and sit with me on the porch, her hand on my arm. "You're stronger than you think, Chloe," she'd say. "You've always been stronger than you think." "Eleanor's going to win," I said one night. "She's got money. She's got connections. I'm just a warehouse worker with a half-finished house." Aunt Ruth shook her head. "Your grandmother didn't raise a quitter. Neither did I. You didn't raise me at all."
"No," she said.
"But I watched you, and I saw what you were made of. You're made of steel, Chloe. You just don't know it yet." The day of the hearing, I wore my best suit, a thrift store find that didn't quite fit. Matthew showed up with a new blazer. "You need to look the part," he said. "Let me help." I didn't argue. I slipped into the blazer and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like someone else. Someone who belonged in a courtroom. Eleanor was there when we arrived. She was a thin woman with sharp features and cold eyes. She sat at a table with her lawyers, whispering and pointing. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. She'd already decided I was nobody. The judge was a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair and a voice like gravel. She listened to Eleanor's lawyers for hours, then turned to Mr. Crawford. "Your turn." Mr. Crawford stood up and walked to the front of the courtroom. He laid out the trust documents, my grandmother's letters, the history of the estate. He spoke clearly and calmly, dismantling Eleanor's arguments piece by piece. "This is a legitimate trust, Your Honor," he said, "created by a woman of sound mind and body. My client, Chloe Williams, is the rightful beneficiary. Any attempt to dissolve this trust is baseless and malicious." Eleanor's lawyers jumped up, shouting objections. The judge slammed her gavel. "Order. I will have order in my courtroom." I sat in the back, my hands clasped in my lap. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Matthew was beside me, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. "Stay calm," he whispered. "You've got this." The hearing lasted 3 days. On the 3rd day, the judge called a recess and then returned with her decision. She looked at me, then at Eleanor. "I have reviewed all the evidence," she said. "It is the opinion of this court that the trust in question is valid and enforceable. The motion to dissolve is denied. Ms. Williams is the legal heir to her grandmother's estate." I didn't process the words. I heard them, but they didn't land. It was like listening to a language I didn't understand. "Congratulations, Ms. Williams," the judge said. "The court is adjourned." Matthew grabbed my arm. "Chloe, we did it. You did it." I looked at him. His face was split in a grin so wide I could see his molars. I looked at Mr. Crawford, who was packing up his files with a satisfied smile. And then I looked at Eleanor. She was pale, her lips pressed together in a thin line. Her lawyers were already leaving, abandoning her at the table. She caught my eye. For a moment, I saw something in her face, not anger, not sadness. Resignation. The look of someone who'd lost something she'd never truly. "Your grandmother always did favor the underdog," she said. Her voice was dry, brittle. I should have known. I didn't respond. I walked out of the courtroom with my head held high outside. The sun was blinding. I stood on the courthouse steps and let the warmth wash over me. Matthew was beside me, still grinning. "Let's celebrate," he said.
Dinner.
My treat. "I don't have time for dinner. I've got to get back to work." "Chloe, you just won. We're celebrating. No arguments." I wanted to argue. I wanted to go back to the warehouse and lose myself in the rhythm of stacking boxes and clocking out. But I looked at Matthew, at the joy in his eyes, and I felt something break loose inside me. Something I'd been holding onto for too long. "Okay," I said. "Dinner." We went to a small Italian place downtown. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and smelled like garlic and fresh bread. We ordered wine. We ordered pasta. And for the first time in months, I let myself breathe. "To Chloe," Matthew said, raising his glass. "The strongest person I know." I laughed. "That's not true." "It is," he said. "You've been through hell, and you're still standing. That's strength. Real strength." I clinked my glass against his and took a sip. The wine was dry and slightly bitter. It tasted like victory. "Matthew," I said, "I want to ask you something." "Anything." "After you found the documents in Dad's safe, what made you decide to give them to me? You could have hidden them. You could have kept the whole thing quiet." He set his glass down and looked at me. His expression was serious, thoughtful. "I had a dream," he said. "A few nights after I found the safe. I dreamed about Grandma. She was standing in her kitchen, the old house on Maple Street, and she was holding a pie. She looked at me and she said, 'Matthew, you've got a choice to make. You can be your parents' son, or you can be my grandson, but you can't be both.'" I stared at him. "You're serious? I know it sounds crazy," he said. But I woke up and I knew what I had to do. I spent my whole life trying to be what Mom and Dad wanted, and it made me miserable. It made me cruel. I didn't want to be that person anymore. I didn't know what to say. I never believed in signs or dreams or any of that. But sitting there in that small Italian restaurant with my brother across from me, I felt something shift. "Thank you," I said, "for choosing her. For choosing me." He reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm sorry it took me so long." We finished dinner and walked out into the cool night air. The streets were quiet, the shops closed. We walked in silence, side by side, but when we got back to the house, Matthew stopped at the gate. "Are you going to sell it?" he asked. The house. I looked at the building. It was dark, the windows unlit, but I could see it in my mind as clearly as if I was standing inside. The walls I'd painted, the floors I'd sanded, the roof I'd fixed with my own hands. "No," I said. "I'm going to keep it." "That's what I thought you'd say." He turned to leave, but I stopped him. "Matthew." He looked back. "Thank you," I said, "for being here, for believing in me. I know it's not easy. I know I haven't made it easy." "Chloe," he said, "you don't have to thank me. You're my sister. That's all the reason I need." He walked back to his car and drove away. I stood on the porch and watched his taillights disappear around the corner. The next day, I called Mr. Crawford. "I want to start a business," I said. "A renovation company. Can you help me set up the paperwork?" "I'd be happy to," he said, and I spent the next week drawing up a business plan. I didn't have any experience running a company, but I had experience building things. I had experience fixing things. I had experience turning nothing into something. And I had a partner. Matthew called the next Saturday. I want to invest, he said. Not just money.
Time.
I want to work with you. You don't know anything about construction. I can learn. You taught me to paint. You can teach me the rest. I hesitated. The thought of working with Matthew, day in and day out, was terrifying. But it was also thrilling. Okay, I said. But you're going to have to follow my lead. Wouldn't dream of doing anything else. And so we began. We started with small jobs, painting, minor repairs, fixing up old homes in the neighborhood. I did the design and the heavy lifting. Matthew did the paperwork and the client communications. We were a strange pair, the golden boy and the forgotten daughter. But somehow we worked. The first year was rough. We took jobs that barely paid the bills. We worked in the heat, in the cold, in the rain. But we built a reputation. People started talking. The woman with the calluses and the brother with the nice suits. The company that fixed things right. And then, one day I got a call. A big job. A Victorian mansion on the other side of town, half collapsed and rotting. The owner was an elderly woman who'd inherited it from her grandmother and wanted to restore. I heard you're the best, she said. Can you help me? I looked at Matthew. He was sanding a window frame, dust in his hair. Yeah, I said. I think I can. The Victorian mansion was a monster. 3 stories of sagging wood, broken windows, and a roof that looked like it had been through a war. The front porch was held up by cinder blocks and prayer. The paint was peeling so badly it looked like the house was shedding its skin that I stood on the sidewalk and stared at it. Matthew was beside me, his mouth hanging open. Chloe, he said, this is a teardown. It's a restoration. It's a death trap. The bones are good, I said. Look at the foundation. Look at the brickwork. This house was built to last. It just needs someone to believe in it. The owner, a woman named Mrs. Patterson, came out to meet us. She was in her 70s, small and bird-like, with white hair and a voice like wind chimes. I've lived here my whole life, she said. My grandmother built it. When she died, she left it to me, but I can't take care of it anymore. I can't afford the repairs. The city's been threatening to condemn it. I don't want to lose it. I just don't know what else to do. I looked at the house. I looked at Mrs. Patterson. And I made a decision. I'll do it, I said. I'll restore it. Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with tears. Oh, honey, I can't pay you. I barely have enough for groceries. I'm not charging you, I said. I'm doing it for the portfolio. When I'm done, this house is going to be my calling card. Matthew pulled me aside. Chloe, are you out of your mind? This is going to take months. Years. We don't have the resources for a free job. We'll make it work, I said. Trust me. He looked at me, his face a mix of frustration and admiration. You're impossible, he said. You know that? Yeah, I said. I know. We started the next day. The first thing we did was stabilize the foundation. That took 2 weeks. Then we replaced the roof, which took another 3. I worked from dawn to dusk, my hands blistered and raw. Matthew worked beside me, learning as he went. He'd never done anything like this before, but he was a quick study. By the end of the first month, he could frame a wall and install a window without my help. The neighbors started coming by. They brought coffee and sandwiches and stories about the house. I used to play in that yard when I was a kid, one man said. Mrs. Patterson's grandmother used to give us cookies. Another woman told me about the wedding that had been held on the porch, the bride in white, the groom in his uniform. I started to feel like I wasn't just restoring a house. I was restoring a piece of the neighborhood, a piece of history. One afternoon, I was stripping wallpaper in the parlor when I found something. Behind a layer of faded floral print was a small door, barely visible. I pried it open and found a dark space. A crawl space, maybe. I shone my flashlight inside and saw a small box, covered in dust. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were letters, tied with a ribbon. They were old, yellowed, the ink fading. I sat on the floor and read them. That they were love letters, written by a man to a woman. The woman was Mrs. Patterson's grandmother. The man was someone else, not her husband. The letters were passionate and sad. They talked about a future they couldn't have, a love that couldn't be. They talked about promises made and broken. I read them all. Then I put them back in the box and closed the lid. That night, I sat on the porch with Matthew and told him what I'd found. He was quiet for a long time. Are you going to tell Mrs. Patterson? He asked. I don't know, I said. It's not really my business. Maybe she'd want to know. Maybe it would help her understand something. I thought about it. I thought about Mrs. Patterson, about the way she talked about her grandmother, the way she loved her, the way she'd come to love this house. I'll think about it, I said. The next week, Matthew brought Amanda to the house. She was different than I remembered, softer, quieter. She stood on the porch and looked at the mansion, her hands in her pockets. Matthew told me about the project, she said. I wanted to see it for myself. I invited her inside. She walked through the rooms, her fingers trailing over the walls. It's beautiful, she said. I can see what you're doing. You're bringing it back to life. Thank you, I said. She stopped in the parlor. Matthew and I are talking again, she said. We're trying to work things out. That's good, I said. I know he was hard on you. I know you two had a complicated history. But he's changed, Chloe. He's really changed. I've seen it. He has changed, I said. I never thought I'd say that, but he has. We talked for a while longer. I showed her the letters I'd found, the ones hidden behind the wallpaper. She read them carefully, her face unreadable. This is beautiful, she said. This is a love story. A real one. The messy kind. Should I tell Mrs. Patterson? Amanda looked at me. I think you should, she said. I think the truth is always better than a lie, even when it's hard. I took the letters to Mrs. Patterson the next day. I sat in her small kitchen and handed her the box. She opened it, her hands trembling. What is this? She asked. Read them, I said. They belong to your grandmother. She read them in silence. Her face changed as she read, surprise, sadness, understanding. When she was done, she set the letters down and looked at me. I always wondered, she said. I knew there was something. A story my grandmother never told me. I think she wanted to protect me. To protect the family. Did it hurt? I asked. Finding out, she shook her head. No, she said. It made me love her more. She had a full life. A complicated life. And she still built this house. She still made a home. That takes strength. Real strength. She reached across the table and took my hand. Thank you for bringing this to me. It means more than you know. The restoration took 11 months. On the last day, Matthew and I stood on the porch and looked at the house. It was beautiful. The paint was fresh, a soft cream color. The windows were new, catching the light. The porch was solid, the roof was sound. The house was alive again. Mrs. Patterson came outside. She walked up the stairs slowly, her hand on the railing. When she reached the top, she turned and looked at the house. Then she looked at me. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You don't have to, I said. This is what I do. No, she said. This is what you were meant to do. She gave me a hug, the kind of hug that felt like an heirloom. When she pulled away, she was crying. Would you do me a favor? She asked. Would you promise me something, anything? I said, promise me you'll keep building. Promise me you'll keep saving places like this. The world needs people like you. People who see the beauty in broken things. I promised her, and I meant it. That night, I sat on my own porch, the porch I'd rebuilt with my own hands, and looked out at the street. The lights were on in the neighbors' houses. A dog barked somewhere. Mr. Henderson was watering his roses. Matthew came out and sat beside me. He was quiet for a long time. Chloe, he said, I want to talk to you about something. Okay. I've been thinking about our parents, about Mom and Dad, and I've been thinking about how they treated you, how they treated both of us, really. They made me into something I'm not proud of, and they made you feel invisible, and I don't know. I want to make it right. I want to find a way to honor what we lost, but also build something new. I looked at him. What do you have in mind? I want to start a scholarship, he said. In their name.
For kids who need a second chance.
Kids who've been overlooked. Kids like you. I felt the tears prick at my eyes. That's actually a good idea. I know, he said, smiling. I'm full of them. We sat in silence for a while. The night was warm, the sky full of stars. Matthew, I said, do you ever wonder what they'd think if they could see us now? He thought about it. I think Mom would be confused, he said. I think Dad would be proud. But I don't think it matters anymore. What matters is what we do from here. What we build. I nodded. Yeah, I said. I think you're right. We went back inside. The house was warm, the lights soft. I walked through the rooms and looked at everything I'd built. The kitchen, with its salvaged cabinets and solid counters. The living room, with its soft gray walls and refinished floors. The bedroom, with its window that looked out at the garden. And I thought about Mrs. Patterson's house. About the letters I'd found, the love story hidden behind the wallpaper. About the woman who'd built a house out of broken things, who'd loved and lost and still made a home. I thought about my grandmother, about the trust she'd left me, about the house she'd given me, about the freedom she'd wanted for me. And I thought about myself, the woman I'd become, the woman I was still becoming. I was no longer the girl in the basement. I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was Chloe Williams. And I was just getting started. The scholarship went live 6 months later. Matthew handled most of it, the paperwork, the website, the outreach to local schools. I handled the naming. We called it the Williams Family Second Chance Fund. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't huge. But it was ours.
And it was real.
The first recipient was a girl named Maya. She was 17, lived in a group home, and had been told her whole life she wouldn't amount to anything. Her essay was about survival, about the nights she'd spent in shelters, the days she'd gone hungry, the teachers who'd looked through her like she was made of glass. She wrote about wanting to be an architect, about wanting to build things that would last. I read her essay 3 times. Each time, I cried a little more. I called her myself to tell her she'd won. She was quiet on the phone. I could hear her breathing, shallow and quick. Are you serious? She asked. I'm serious, I said. You're going to college. You're going to be an architect. And you're going to be amazing. She started crying. I sat on my porch and listened to her cry, and I felt something click into place inside me. This was what it was all about. Not the money, not the house, not the business.
This.
Giving someone a chance. Matthew came over that evening. He was carrying a bottle of cheap champagne and 2 plastic cups. I thought we should celebrate, he said. We sat on the porch and drank the champagne. It was warm and slightly flat, but it didn't matter. She reminded me of you, Matthew said.
Maya.
When I read her essay, I thought about you, about how hard you had to fight. Every kid has to fight, I said. That's not special. It's not the fighting that's special. It's what you do after. It's the building. I looked at him.
He was different now.
Softer, but stronger. He'd stopped wearing his expensive suits. He wore jeans and work boots like the rest of us. He'd stopped pretending to be someone he wasn't. You've changed, I said. I never thought I'd say that about you, but you have. He smiled. You changed me. Well, you and Amanda. And Mrs. Patterson. And that kid we just helped. And this house. I don't know, Chloe. I think I just finally started paying attention. The business grew faster than I'd expected. Word spread about the Victorian mansion, and suddenly everyone wanted us to restore their old houses. We hired 2 more people, a carpenter named Luis and a painter named Diane. They were good. They were reliable. And they believed in what we were doing. I spent my days on job sites, my hands in the dirt and the dust and the paint. I spent my nights at the kitchen table, going over numbers and planning the next project. I was tired all the time, but it was a good tired, a satisfying tired. That one afternoon, I got a call from Mr. Crawford. I have some news, he said. It's about your parents' estate, the house on Oak Street. It's been sitting empty since the fire. The bank wants to sell it. I felt my stomach drop. What do you mean, sell it? It's being put up for auction. They're trying to recoup the losses from the insurance claim. I thought you should know. I hung up and sat in my truck for a long time. The house on Oak Street. The house where I'd grown up. The house where I'd been invisible. The house where my parents had died, that I didn't know how to feel about it. Part of me wanted to let it go, burn it to the ground, metaphorically speaking. But another part of me couldn't let it go. It was still part of my history, part of my story, that I told Matthew that night. He was quiet, his face unreadable. Are you going to bid on it? He asked. I don't know, I said. Part of me thinks it's a bad idea, that I should just let it go. But another part of me, I don't know. I feel like I need to reclaim it. Reclaim it how? I don't know, I said. Maybe turn it into something good, something that helps people, like a community center or a shelter, something that honors what we lost but also looks forward. Matthew nodded slowly. That's not a terrible idea. High praise. I mean it, he said. If anyone can turn that place into something good, it's you. You've already done it once. With this house. You can do it again. The auction was held at the county courthouse. I showed up early, dressed in my best clothes. Matthew came with me. So did Aunt Ruth. She held my hand as we walked into the room. The bidding started low. The house was damaged. The land wasn't great. Most people were there for the scrap value. I waited, watching the numbers climb, and then I raised my paddle. 40,000. I said to the auctioneer, looked at me. 40,000 going once, going twice. 50. Someone called out. I turned. It was Eleanor. She was sitting in the back, a thin smile on her face. She'd come back. Of course she had. 60. I said 70. She said it. I felt my heart pounding. The money was there. The trust had given me enough to cover it. But it was more than I'd planned. Much more. 80. I said 90. 100. The room went silent. The auctioneer looked at Eleanor. She shook her head, her smile gone. Sold, he said. To Chloe Williams. I walked out of the courthouse in a daze. The house was mine. The house I'd grown up in. The house I'd run away from. It was mine. Matthew grabbed my arm. You did it, he said. You actually did it. I don't know if I should be proud or terrified. I said, both, he said. Both is fine. We drove to Oak Street the next day. The house was a shell. The fire had gutted the interior, leaving only the walls and the foundation. The roof was gone. The windows were boarded up. It looked like a corpse. I walked through the ruins. I saw the kitchen, where my mother had folded laundry. I saw the living room, where my father had sat in his chair. I saw the basement, the room that had been my prison. And I felt nothing. No anger.
No sadness.
Just a quiet sense of closure. This is where I slept, I said, pointing to the basement stairs. Down there, on a pull-out couch, there was a window well. I used to look out at the sky and dream about getting out. Matthew was silent. I could feel him looking at me. I used to hate this place, I said. I used to hate everything about it. The way it smelled, the way it felt, the way it made me feel invisible. And now I turned and looked at him. Now I think I understand. It wasn't the house. It was the people in it. And they're gone. What's left is just a building. Just wood and nails and bricks. It can be anything we want it to be. We stood in the ruins of our childhood home, two people who'd grown up in the same place but had lived completely different lives. And for the first time, I didn't feel like we were strangers.
We're going to rebuild it, I said.
Not as a home, but as something else. Something good. What did you have in mind? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. That night, I sat on my porch and thought about the house on Oak Street. I thought about my parents. I thought about my grandmother. I thought about Maya, the girl who was going to become an architect. And I thought about what I wanted my legacy to be, that I wasn't going to be defined by my parents' neglect. I wasn't going to be defined by my brother's cruelty. I wasn't going to be defined by the basement or the blame or the years of being invisible. I was going to be defined by what I built that the next morning I called Mr. Crawford. I want to set up a nonprofit, I said. A housing foundation. We're going to buy dilapidated properties and restore them. We're going to give people a chance to own a home. People like me. People like Maya. That's ambitious, he said. I know, I said. But I've got the money now. And I've got the experience. And I got the time. He was quiet for a moment. I'll start the paperwork. I hung up and walked outside. The sun was rising, turning the sky pink and gold. I looked at my house, the house I'd rebuilt, and I smiled. This was just the beginning. There was so much more to do, so much more to build. And I was ready. For the first time in my life, I was truly, completely ready that the ribbon-cutting ceremony was on a Saturday. The same Saturday, exactly 10 years to the day, that I'd walked out of the house on Oak Street with nothing but a jacket and my grandmother's letter. I hadn't planned it that way. It just happened. A coincidence. Or maybe not if the foundation was called Second Start. We'd taken the shell of my childhood home and turned it into a community center. There was a kitchen where my mother used to stand, a meeting room where my father used to watch television, a small library in the basement, the same basement where I'd slept on a pull-out couch and dreamed of escape. The irony wasn't lost on me. The place that had once been my prison was now a place where people could find freedom. Matthew was there. So was Amanda, Aunt Ruth, Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Patterson, Maya, the first scholarship recipient, who is now in her second year of architecture school, Luis and Diane from the business, Mr. Crawford, who'd helped me navigate every legal hurdle, and a crowd of neighbors, strangers, people who'd heard the story and wanted to see what I'd built. I stood at the front of the room, a pair of oversized scissors in my hand. The ribbon was red, thick and shiny. I looked out at the faces. I saw hope. I saw kindness. I saw people who believed in second chances. I thought about my parents. I wondered what they'd think if they could see me now. Not the daughter they'd ignored, but the woman I'd become. The one who'd taken their neglect and turned it into fuel. The one who'd taken their rejection and turned it into a mission. "Thank you all for coming," I said. My voice was steady, louder than I expected. This building means a lot to me. It was my childhood home. And for a long time, that wasn't a good thing. I felt small here. Invisible. I felt like I didn't matter. I paused. The room was silent, but I learned something important. It wasn't the building that made me feel that way. It was the people inside it. And those people are gone now. What's left is just brick and mortar. And brick and mortar can be rebuilt. It can be repurposed. It can become something new. I gestured to the room around me. This is what we've done. We've taken something broken and made it whole. We've taken something sad and made it hopeful. And that's what Second Start is all about. Giving people a chance to rebuild. A chance to become something new. There was applause. I smiled and cut the ribbon. The red fabric fell to the floor, and the crowd poured in. I stood back and watched them. Children running through the library. Adults talking in the meeting room. An elderly woman in the kitchen, her hands on the counter, a look of quiet wonder on her face. Matthew came up beside me. "You did it," he said. "You actually did it." "We did it," I said. "I couldn't have done it without you." He shook his head. "You could have. You would have. But I'm glad you let me be part of it." We stood in silence, watching the people. The building was alive. Alive with laughter, with conversation, with possibility. "Chloe," Matthew said, "I have something to tell you." "Okay." "Amanda's pregnant. We're having a baby." I turned to look at him. His face was lit up with a joy I'd never seen before. Pure, unguarded happiness. "That's amazing," I said. "Congratulations." "Thanks," he said. "And I was thinking if it's a girl, I want to name her after our grandmother. The one who left you the trust. The one who believed in you." I felt my throat tighten. "You do that," she was important. To both of us. Without her, I don't think I'd be standing here. I don't think I'd be the person I am now. I reached out and took his hand. "She'd be proud of you, Matthew." "I know she would." He squeezed my hand and let go. "There's something else," he said. "What now?" "I've been talking to Maya. She's got some ideas for the building. Extensions. A roof garden. A workshop. She's got big plans." I laughed. "Of course she does. She's an architect now." "She's got something else too," he said. "A proposal. She wants to work with us. Part-time, while she finishes school. She wants to be part of Second Start. She wants to help." I looked across the room. Maya was in the corner, talking to a group of kids. She was animated, her hands moving as she described something. The kids were listening, their eyes wide. Tell her she's hired. I said the day wore on. I talked to everyone, shook hands, answered questions. I was exhausted by the end of it, but it was a good exhaustion. The kind that comes from doing something meaningful. That evening, I sat on the front steps of the community center. The sun was setting, turning the street golden. Mr. Henderson walked by, with his dog. He waved. I waved back. Aunt Ruth came out and sat beside me. You did good, Chloe. Really good. Thanks, Aunt Ruth. Your grandmother would be proud. I know she would. I looked at her. The woman who'd taken me in when I had nowhere else to go. The woman who'd kept my grandmother's secret. The woman who'd believed in me long before I believed in myself. I don't know what I would have done without you, I said. You would have figured it out, she said. You always do. We sat in silence for a while. The street was quiet. The air smelled like cut grass and evening flowers. Aunt Ruth, I said, can I ask you something? Anything? Did you ever feel like giving up, like it was all too much? She laughed. Every day, she said. Every single day. But I didn't. Because I knew something you didn't. What? Deep down, you're not the kind of person who gives up. You might feel like it. You might want to, but you can't. It's not in your nature. I leaned my head on her shoulder. She was small and bony, but she was solid. She was real. I love you, Aunt Ruth. I said, I love you too, Chloe. Always have. Always will. We sat there until the stars came out. And I thought about everything I'd been through. The years of invisibility. The months of rebuilding. The lawsuits. The struggles. The triumphs. I thought about the house on Oak Street. Now a place of hope. I thought about my grandmother's trust, the freedom she'd given me. I thought about Matthew, my brother, my partner. I thought about Maya, the girl who had become an architect. And I realized something. The house on Oak Street, the basement where I'd slept, the parents who'd ignored me. None of it had broken me.
It had shaped me.
It had made me the person I was. Someone who could see the potential in broken things. Someone who could rebuild. I stood up and walked back inside. The building was quiet now, the crowd gone. I walked through the rooms, my footsteps echoing. I stopped at the library in the basement. The same basement where I used to lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd ever escape. The shelves were filled with books. Donations from the community. There were chairs and tables, and a rug on the floor. It was warm, inviting, alive. I ran my hand along the wall. The drywall was new, the paint fresh. I couldn't see the old walls anymore, but I knew they were there underneath. The foundation was still the same. The bones were still strong, just like me. The next morning, I got a call from Mrs. Patterson. Chloe, she said, I want to donate the Victorian to Second Start. It's been sitting empty since you fixed it up. I don't need it, but the community does. I was speechless. Mrs. Patterson, you can't. That's your home. No, she said. My home is wherever I am, and I'm going to move in with my daughter. But that house, it deserves to be used. It deserves to be loved. And I can't think of a better place for it than Second Start. I felt the tears come. I didn't try to stop them. Thank you, I said. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, she said. Just keep building. Keep believing. That's all the thanks I need. I hung up and looked out the window. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. I thought about my grandmother, the woman who'd left me a house, the woman who'd believed in me when no one else did, the woman who'd given me the tools to build my own future. I thought about my parents. They were gone now, but I didn't hate them anymore. I didn't blame them. They were just people. Flawed, broken people who'd done their best in a way that had hurt me, but I was no longer the girl they'd hurt. I was no longer the girl in the basement. I was a builder, a creator, a giver of second chances. And I was just getting started.